Sten, we're live.
And welcome on this Thursday afternoon to another edition of In the Dugout. Today, for no particular reason, I'm going to wear my Red Sox cap and in the dugout. But the first thing I want to do is take off that cap and ask you to join me in a moment of silence for Bill Rappley. I had no idea he was sick with cancer. Who passed away apparently this morning. Bill, as you remember, was the former Channel 10 political reporter, was about to launch his own new series on PBS. So he became a good friend after all the interviews we've done over the years. So I ask you a moment of silence for Bill. Thank you. Also, just quickly, we can talk about it more, but again, as our center first reported 7 weeks ago, almost 8 weeks ago, November 17th, Gina Raimondo, our governor, has apparently been nominated and selected by incoming President Joe Biden to be the Commerce Secretary. Now, that's a hard sell to me. It's a complete downgrade to our current Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, and I explain all that. And if I can ask Larry, the Liberty guy, maybe you can in the tweets. In one of my tweets, Larry, I've got that link. So that's like at the 25. Maybe you can put that in the comment section here, so people can see my analysis of why this Raimondo appointment would be such a downgrade. But again, the major point being is I want you all to know that our center was the first group to confirm that. I mean, we said with 95% assurity on November 17th that indeed Raimondo would be the appointment for Commerce Secretary. Whether she accepts or not is yet to be seen, and there are no official reports of that yet. Okay, today, I'm going to give you a contrarian view. I guess that's our job, not to go along with the, well, it's not our job, but if we disagree with the public narrative, the media narrative, the leftist narrative, if there are Republicans, conservatives, news outlets, commentators too weak to stand up on their own, we're not that. We will always stand on principle. We will always defend freedom and constitutional rights first. And no matter what the general consensus is or the conventional wisdom, you're going to hear from us exactly what needs to be said. This is one of the only shows in the state where you will get that. So you're going to hear things, some things from me and from Justin Katz, who will join us in a while, that are going to go against the grain. But if you think about it, you're going to see that they're well based in principle. When Justin Katz joins us and throughout the show, we'll talk about how, our representatives go along with that flow. They're calling for Trump to be impeached or removed via the 25th Amendment. I mean, it's just ridiculous cancel culture. Second half of the show, we're going to have civil rights leader, Rhode Island civil rights leader, minority advocate Ray Rickman. And we're going to talk about whether yesterday's Capitol protests, riots, whatever you want to call them, were any worse or any different than the summer riots that destroyed so much private property, took lives in so many cities across our country. So that will be coming up in the second half of our show. But let's get right into something that this alone is going to be provocative, right? But we don't shy away from that stuff. I want you to read this, to look at this, and I want you to think about this. Hold on. Here we go. The Tree of Liberty, Thomas Jefferson. The Tree of Liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. Now, that's a powerful statement. That's a smart man. That's a statement that has been proven true time after time after time over this nation's and other nations' history. I think the question is, are we at that time now? Were we at that time yesterday? Was yesterday an aberration? Was it a disgrace? Or was it a necessary expression by the people for freedom? Was it about Donald Trump? Or was it about the election? Or was it about something bigger? I think it was a warning message. Short of the violence at the Capitol, maybe even, I would say, okay, if you peacefully occupied the Capitol, the steps, not breaking in. But still, I'm not, but the violence, the vandalism, never, obviously. Let me be right up front, never. But was yesterday just a wildly incited mob by Donald Trump, as the left wants you to believe? Or was it something much more profound and deeper? Was it a warning message sent? I think of the Gadsden flag, don't tread on me. Don't tread on us, which I don't know which one. The lesson, at least that I felt, I was initially, before I understood the extent of the violence. And again, we don't know, we'll talk about that later. We don't know who caused that violence. I don't say proud, but I was kind of happy to see people finally stand up, organize, and speak out. I mean, the left does it, and they're cheered when they do it. And we'll talk about that later with Ray Rickman. But when we do it on the right, we're vilified. What is a free people supposed to do in the face of tyranny? The left wants you to think that Trump and our team are the fascists. I have said this governor and her ilk are the fascists. They are the one actually imposing regulations, mandates, stay-at-home orders, business lockdowns, mask mandates. They are the ones imposing those on the people and using the armed forces of government to harass you if you don't. Who's the fascist? I saw yesterday's protest, at least the initial part, the peaceful part, as an expression of the frustration of the people, of a people desiring to be free in the face of tyranny. Now, everyone else you've heard gives you a different view on that. And it's true, and we've seen this with the Trump derangement syndrome, with the liberal versus conservative, that depending on the lens you look through, we can look at the same thing and see it completely differently. The left saw that as a Trump-inspired wild melee of mindless people devoted to some kind of dictator that they have some kind of Stepford wife relationship with or something like that. That's their view. My view, as I just told you, was very different. My view is that this was a cry. This was not about Donald Trump. We'll talk about that more a little later, that this was about something much bigger than Donald Trump. And I think yesterday we have to separate the tens and if not hundreds of thousands of peaceful protesters from the few hundred or few thousand who stormed the building, vandalized, and initiated some kind of violence. I'm going to go through in a little more expanded fashion something I said at the top of yesterday. Again, I love the revolutionary analogy. Again, I don't think this is about that. What happened yesterday was about Donald Trump. Yeah, they were carrying. We're going to talk about this with Ray Rickman in the second half of the show. I've got a Martin Luther King analogy to ask him about there. But what I have felt this entire year, and what I think came to a head yesterday, and as we kind of, making an analogy to the Declaration of Independence, was a long train of abuses over the past year that just got to a boiling point. Pressure built up so high that freedom-loving Americans just burst a little bit. Again, we never justify violence, but I want you to just think about this. It's going to take me a minute or two to get through all this, but think about this. Well, a long train of abuses in the past year, after over a year of witnessing it started last year with a contrived political impeachment of a duly elected and very successful president. We then quickly went into pandemic fear. We were locked down. We had our First Amendment and religious rights trampled. We were told not to even meet with our families. We were thrown out of our jobs and laid off. Many people lost their businesses and their lifelong savings that they invested in those businesses. We were continually lied to by medical and political bureaucrats seeking to enhance their own popularity or their own power. We saw riots in cities across America with private property destroyed, cars burned, businesses burned to the ground. The looters were ignored by the local law enforcement. Criminals, those few who were arrested, were immediately set free to terrorize again without bail. We saw the vilification and defunding of the police who protect us. Many of us, or at least as conservatives, continually called racist, continually accused of being guilty of white privilege. We observed unequal or delayed justice, and what we know for fact was criminal activity, lying to the courts, lying to Congress when it came to the fake Russia collusion. We expected something to happen last summer and last fall. It did not. Justice delayed is not justice served. They keep promising it's coming. Unequal justice. We saw just incredible media bias towards one side, not our side, overtly against our side. We've been subject to that. We've had our Twitter accounts censored by big tech. We saw big tech and the media cover up obvious criminal, if not unethical, activity by the son of a major presidential candidate. Completely covered up to where most Americans didn't even know about it. Then we witnessed an election that had obvious voter fraud. How much? Who the hell knows? No one's investigated. That's the problem. Obvious voter fraud with no open or transparent or legal investigation or courtroom hearing. State legislatures failed to correct the voter cheating. In fact, they opened the door to it sometimes. In other cases, it was the executive branch or the courts. In fact, the courts then failed to engage. Why would they engage when they are the ones who opened the door to this kind of cheating in the first place? And then knowing that the administration, this incoming administration, is going to take a hard left turn towards socialism. Why should any American accept a turn towards socialism? Oh, Joe Biden may not be a socialist, but he's going to go along with the flow towards socialism. He's going to be controlled by whatever that deep state globalist group is towards world socialism. That's not even socialism, that's totalitarianism. We've been told our taxes are going to be raised, the largest tax increase in the history of our country. Our freedoms will be limited when it comes to energy and health choices. And then yesterday, before the violence took place, or the Capitol Hill storming, if you want to call it, took place, you heard from the vice president and from U.S. senators that now we're not going to consider your concerns about election fraud. Your voice doesn't count. How much can a free people take? Never before has the power of government, this time in cahoots with their allies and big business and big tech and the big media, never before has there been such a conspiracy to encroach upon our individual and constitutional rights, our civil rights. And they do it, and they do it openly and self-righteously, knowing that there is no institution more powerful or even willing to try to stop them. Not the courts, not the Justice Department, not any elected body of officials. And so they openly laugh at us and say, we are going to trample on your rights and freedoms. And we're going to force you to follow our agenda, or at least we're going to block you from putting forth your agenda. I would say this, looking back at this quote again from Thomas Jefferson, just a moment to bring it up, that what you saw yesterday, if I am correct, that this was really a cry for liberty, not a defense of Donald Trump. If that's what it was, then what happened yesterday, in my view, was completely American. That's how we formed as a nation. We said, no, we're not going to accept this long train of abuses from the crown. 200 and almost 50 years ago. Why would we accept a long train of abuses from our state and federal governments now? It is completely, so many people said, what an un-American and disgraceful thing it was in Dark Day. Well, the violence is always disgraceful. But the premise of the protest was completely American, in my view. Joining us now is Justin Katz, my partner with the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity. He's one of the original conservative bloggers in the country, not to mention the state. You may remember Anchor Rising from decades ago. Now he's combined Anchor Rising and is the editor of our center's Ocean State Current. A true conservative thinker. Justin, welcome back to In the Dugout.
Hey, good to be here, Sten. Thanks for having me on.
All right, what do you got for me? What do you got for me first?
Well, you just mentioned Anchor Rising, so I'll break out the vintage
Anchor There's Rising. Such a thing as an Anchor Rising hat?
Yeah, they're in short supply these days. You've got to.
I got to get one of those. I got to have an autographed one of those. So put one aside.
I'll see if I can dig some out from the.
I'll even pay for it. All right. So, you heard me say that this. We're going to operate on the premise, short of the violence, that was a completely American response we saw yesterday. Frustration boiling over. Your thoughts?
I think you're absolutely right. And I was thinking just before the show of something that I think it's actually less controversial than it seems to say something like that, because I'm just imagining, I saw some bloggers on Instapundit, which is, you mentioned I was a blogger. They kind of set the tone for blogging 20 years ago. But they were saying, well, imagine if Trump had won and been declared president. Do you doubt there would be riots? And I don't think many people doubt that. We've seen riots for the past year, and it was an expression of democracy. Mainstream Democrats are saying we'll keep having these rallies and riots until the people's voice is heard. So I think it's completely a completely American thing, as you said, and I think nobody would be complaining about it. It's really they've decided that the conservatives are not allowed to do that, and so that's what makes it an affront to a lot of people, I think.
All right, now I mentioned something generally that based on something you had said to me earlier today, specifically that this might have been a warning shot, or maybe even more, that the Tea Party movement was a warning. The election of Trump itself was a warning, and now yesterday, what do you think's going on there?
Well, I think it's almost. I'm trying to think of a good analogy here. It's almost like two brothers wrestling, and one of them keeps getting a little more aggressive, and the other one, rather than deal with whatever the disagreement is, keeps pushing them off, and the other brother it keeps escalating essentially. And I think that's what we're seeing. We're seeing.
Well, that's how my younger brother was.
Well, it's not clear who's younger and who's stronger here, and that's the kind of the scary thing. But if you look back to the Tea Party, which is when a lot of people really got involved in politics around here, that was a lot of it was frustration, not at Obama, but at the fact that no matter what the conservatives did, the Republicans would capitulate, they would play games, they wouldn't get the policies they thought they voted for. And then you get somebody like Obama from the left coming in, and suddenly you do get those policies. You get Obamacare. When the left wins, they get what they voted for, and when the right wins, they don't. That's why the Tea Party started. And so what happens? You get the IRS coming after the Tea Party, trying to stop the Tea Party. You get constant news reports trying to badmouth them, even though they picked up after themselves. That got worse and worse and worse. Then what do you get? You get Donald Trump elected in a surprise election of people essentially sending a message to Washington's mainstream saying, you got to stop this. What do you get? You get Russiagate. You get Black Lives Matter and Antifa. You get all of this stuff. You get the Kavanaugh hearings. Now you have an election that a lot of us think was pretty clearly stolen, pretty clearly fraud, whether it was direct fraud of switching votes or back to changing the rules. So
all right, but wait a minute, but we can't speak of that. Right? So here's a good image I saw. It's kind of like the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, right? Mm-hmm. We can't talk about election fraud.
Yeah.
We can't talk about tyranny of the elites. They want you to think.
Well, that's what makes it so.
This image was put together to show what an embarrassment yesterday was. That's what this image was. But I looked at this image as that nobody wants to speak the real truth about why those people were there in the hundreds of thousands in the first place yesterday.
Yeah, well, I think that's right. And that's the fact that somebody put up that image to describe the other point of view,
right?
Really shows how we're living in just two completely different worlds.
They called it that's right. They called it a national embarrassment.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like I was saying to somebody earlier. It's almost like a nonstop, perpetual psychological warfare. I mean, it's not only do they want us to accept the election, but we've got to accept that it was the most transparent and most secure election in history. There's no evidence of
liberal
anything.
Land of make believe. Yep.
Exactly. It's not even, and that's what I think we're seeing in Washington yesterday is that sense of frustration where you won't even acknowledge us. You won't even acknowledge our perspective or the facts that as we see them. And I think that's really boiling over. And I think that's where a lot of people on the left and even the never Trumpers and other more moderate conservatives are having a problem because they are thinking this is Trump and it's not.
Yeah.
Trump.
So speaking of looking through the other lens, we just gave you our lens, right? How you and I saw this and how we looked at that picture differently than the left is. So, Aaron Regenberg, former, admitted progressive leftist, former state rep, former candidate for lieutenant governor. In an email he sent out to his supporters today, he said this was a violent right-wing attack against our nation's capital and that Donald Trump and his GOP allies are actively inciting sedition.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing going right to it. I know my frustration is for months now, it's been the mostly peaceful protest. I mean, literally news reporters standing outside of a burning building going, oh, the protest has been mostly peaceful. That's what we've been hearing for months. And now it's not even mainstream WPRI, the AP, mainstream news sources are saying constantly right up front, Donald Trump's violent insurrection. I mean, that's sort of what they're calling it. What happened?
And because of that, now he's got to be with only 13 days to go, 12, he's got to be removed from office now through impeachment or the 25th Amendment. I mean, are these people serious?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think they're making a big, big mistake. They literally think it's about Trump as a personality, and if he would disappear, everything
That's
will go
right.
back to normal. But
That's
if
right.
they do that so gratuitously, so in your face, I think they're going to see a lot of angry people pushing back.
But isn't it also emblematic of a couple things? And then I'll give you two. You comment on them. First of all, this is the cancel culture. You know, not only was it good enough to defeat Donald Trump, as they believe in the election, but we have to crush him and bury him so that his political future in life, even if it's his personal life, is destroyed. We have to search and destroy. Now, that's one angle. The second angle I have you comment on is, if you read, I do read it. I don't believe it. I haven't talked about it on air much, but there's still a lot of people that believe Trump has a Trump card left to play. And I look at the fervor at which the media, some anti-Trumper Republicans and the Democrats are trying to get him out of office. I look at that. Maybe maybe they know about that Trump card and are afraid he might have the chance to play it. So I don't know. It's wild speculation there, but go ahead, comment where you like.
Well, I think on the first question, the I think back to the last few months when we've heard mainstream Democrats nationally, like Robert Reich, for example, who was in the Clinton administration, actively encouraging the punishment and lists and re-education of people who might have supported Trump, and that's not a
Put
controversial.
me on the list. Put me
Yeah,
on the list.
exactly.
You come get me. You come get me.
Yeah, but that was even months ago, before any riots at the Capitol. That was a constant
Right.
talking point that
Right.
we needed to do that. And one of the things that's aggravated me as a process person is the cancel culture attacks on the law firms representing the Trump campaign in the past few months to get them to drop the case as lawyers. So they're depriving the campaign of legal representation. That's wrong. That's process that's just wrong, and it shows the complete disrespect for anybody who disagrees. And I think they're severely miscalculating. And I'm kind of hope it's out of ignorance. I mean, Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader for a long time for the Democrats, essentially neutered the filibuster, and everybody said that'll come back to bite you.
Yeah,
And sure enough, it
It
did.
sure
So I
did.
kind of hope this is that like that, and they don't understand. But I really I know a lot of other conservatives who are concerned that we're never going to have a free and fair election again. They know they've got it locked up, and so they're just going to go wild from here on out.
All right, now we're going to have this debate, or I'm going to have this debate with Ray Rickman in just a few minutes. I believe Ray is of the opinion, and the left is that these were out of control, seditious riots that happened yesterday. Clearly, there were Trump supporters on the grounds of the Capitol, on the steps, in the rotunda, probably in some of the halls, but there is increasing evidence, not convincing and not complete, but that Antifa infiltrators were some of the, if not the only people who are really creating the really violent, vandalism and physical violence against the Capitol Police. Do you have any more information or thoughts on that?
Well, I'm keeping sort of an open mind, which goes both ways for me on that one. I mean, there's been some evidence, but then again, the one guy with the crazy horns and the pelt on his head,
Yeah.
he turns out to be a wacky Trump supporter. So it's hard to say. I mean, there are fringes all along. One thing I do think is kind of conspicuous is for prior rallies, Trump rallies or otherwise, there were Antifa counter rallies and attacks, and I didn't see any of that. So where were they? Did they just throw up their hands and go, we'll let them have Washington for this event? I mean, so that's kind of a suspicious thing to me. But either way, it doesn't much matter. I think the standards for rallies we've seen of Antifa and Black Lives Matter fighting over police barriers, breaking through lines, throwing things at police and attacking spectators, that set the standard for protest. And I think that's a lot of what we saw yesterday. So whether it was Antifa just doing their thing or a very bad warning sign that that's where protest is going in America. And just as a local example, we saw Antifa and that sort of protester had decided that Gina Raimondo's house is now the protest spot in Rhode Island.
Yep.
And now that has become, for Max Jim, for others, that's become the protest spot in Rhode Island. And I think we're seeing
All right.
something similar, a changing of how
All right.
protest works.
Let's do this. You got 5 more minutes or so?
Sure.
All right, let's bring on Ray Rickman, and let's before we ask Justin to leave, let's have a 3-way conversation. So I'm gonna first let's say hi to Ray. I think that's Ray on the other line. So let's bring in Ray. And well, here he is. Here we come. Ray, no video. Looks like you're unmuted. All right,
So
while you work on the video, we'll I'm going to ask Justin's going to be up first, and then you're going to have a chance to answer and respond to Justin with your own views.
Perfect.
Justin, was so you and I, many of us on the conservative side, have noted the disparate, if not hypocritical, coverage of yesterday's protests, riots, whatever you want to call them, as compared to the summer protests / riots, whatever you want to call them, that we saw throughout the country. So 2-part question to you, Justin, and then we'll have Ray weigh in. A, do you think yesterday was as bad, more mild, worse than what we saw over the summer from a violence and destruction point of view? And what are your comments on the mainstream media coverage of the 2 events?
Well, I mean, from my point of view, I don't think there's any question that yesterday was much more mild than what we've seen, both in the amount of violence, in the sustained nature of the violence. It was at most but an hour or so of a surging crowd that went too far and then fell back. Whereas over the summer and before, we saw sustained attacks on the White House for days. Some city blocks in some cities were taken over, destruction of property all over the place, not just a few broken windows, but burning down buildings, federal courthouses with graffiti all over them. So I think by any measure, this was more mild than anything. I think a lot of people on the left, and as I commented to Ray on Facebook, a lot of people on the left think this was worse because it was people they disagree with. And so it feels more aggressive to them. But I don't see any question. In Michigan, some years ago, the unions were breaking into the state house during the whole recall fiasco there. So that's the standard the left has set.
All right, and your thoughts on the media coverage of it?
Well, as I said already, I think that the media coverage is so lamentably biased here that what they're doing is they're driving a giant wedge where some people are looking at it and going right on. This was Trump's violent insurrection, as that's the headline, that's the objective way to characterize it. And other people are looking at this and going, wait, what happened to mostly peaceful? This is them completely disrespecting my point of view and making me not count.
Now we're going to come back to that a little bit later with Ray. Ray, welcome back in the dugout.
Thank you very much.
First order of business. You got anything to show me here for your lid?
Yeah, I've got City of Providence. This is the police department gave me this.
Oh, cool.
And I can't put it on my head because there's going to be another Zoom and my hair will be a mess.
Well, we can't have that. But hold it still. What is it? So it's Providence Police?
Yeah, it's really kind of cool.
All right.
I've got one fire department. A kind of honorary police.
Well,
not that I never wanted to be a policeman. I wanted to be a firefighter when I was younger. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks. So it was your Facebook post today to us where you said, did you ever think you would see assaults on the U.S. Congress? This is as low as it sinks in a functioning democracy. What do you say? Your thoughts on yesterday's event? So I said, well, let's just discuss them on air. So I'm assuming that when you say this is as low as it sinks, to the same question I asked Justin, I assume you think this was beyond anything we saw last summer.
So first, what happens in a whole bunch of countries around the world is they come to the Capitol building and they, shoot the windows out, and then they shoot the president, or in most cases, and sometimes the Congress. And that has never happened in America, ever. And I never thought I would see it. This is was, is still the greatest democracy in the world. And I'd like to keep it that way. So people should not do that. I've been in that building
All
350
right,
times.
can I stop? Can I stop there for 1 second? And
Yes.
because this is a really important philosophical question. So you said I think you just said they don't have the right to do that. Okay. So they don't have, no one has the right to violence. I agree. But when we look at the premise of the summer riots, it was police abuse towards a black race, and it was still, equality. That was their right, their premise for speaking out. If in a democracy, those people yesterday felt like their rights for other reasons were being abused and trampled, do they not have the same right to organize and protest?
You do not beat up Capitol Police. Several of them had their noses broken, bloodied. A member of Congress talked about he was being escorted down the hall and he saw 7 or 8 Capitol Police blood on their faces. This is physical violence. Now, I'm at a wonderful disadvantage. I'm Kingsian, I'm Mahatma Gandhian. I don't believe in violence. And I don't believe in violence to settle political issues, not in my democracy, by anybody.
All right, before I get Justin to comment, Ray, did you see the graphic I put up earlier in my show?
Wait, but let me make this final comment. They disrupted the Congress while they were certifying the next president of the United States, trying to stop one of the most democratic acts, even though generally it's ceremonial, that we have. You can't do that. And
I don't think that's what they were doing.
Final comment to you, yes, they were. They wouldn't have been there at that time on that day. And final comment to you on all of this, I've watched since Nixon, the Republican Party be the party of law and order. And I think, that's their premise, more power to them. And I believe, whatever you want to stand for it. This is not a party you would expect this from. I don't expect it from the Democrats either. But this is not how you conduct yourself in a democracy. And I've had the majority of presidents that have existed during my time. I've not liked one bit. So what? The people vote and they pick who they want.
All right, Justin, your response to Ray, and then I'll take it from there. But go ahead, Justin, your final thoughts to Ray.
Well, it's kind of hard to know how to respond. I mean, first of all, the idea of violence. I mean, we had the guy Hodgson, I think was his name, who shot up the Republican softball team. We had senator who was tackled by his neighbor. You had, as far as democratic processes, you had the Kavanaugh riots where people invaded the building there, trying to disrupt that, and that atrocity of a hearing. Those are all examples of how the left has set us up for this. Now, and my biggest point, though, is I am absolutely in agreement with you that the conservatives, the right, should be concerned with the rule of law, law and order. A lot of the vast majority of the protesters were there actually befriending the police. But the idea, to me, is not that that means this is especially bad. I look at it as looking at things and how do we come back together as a country. I look at that as a terrible sign of, if this is what the law and order and rule of law party is coming to, that's a sign we're all doing something wrong. And I think a lot of the coverage has been terribly, terribly mistaken to be saying this is 100% Trump's fault. No, this is a buildup of frustration, and I think it's a terrible marker of the next step that might come if we don't start hearing each other's voices.
All right, Justin, thank you for joining us. I'll continue the talk with Ray, but Justin, always great stuff. Let's get you back on here soon. So Ray, earlier, Justin and I discussed what you will consider well, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, a provocative theory along the quote of Thomas Jefferson when he said, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." based on that, we put forth the theory that maybe what happened yesterday was completely American democracy. That when free people feel they're being tyrannized, because I don't think this was about Trump, I think this is about a long train of abuses. That's what we argued, that is completely American to not accept tyranny. Your thoughts?
I don't understand any of this. We have elections, and Republicans win some states and expected to win Georgia, and expected to, particularly Georgia, and they expected to win Arizona. Wisconsin's iffy, Pennsylvania's iffy, Michigan's iffy. You have to win a certain number of states with this, the way the system's set up. And last time, to my amazement, and I think to Donald Trump's amazement, he won. Now, I don't understand what is the difference between 2016 and 2020. You put yourself out there, you get your troops, you get your money, you get your advertisements, and you try to convince 50, whatever.
Well, see, it's not about the election. You're focused on Trump and the election. We're saying it's much bigger than that.
Can I tell
Much
you,
bigger than that.
I agree with you. The vast majority of Americans, left, right, and even in the middle, are not happy with this society. But it does not give them the right to disrupt the Congress of the United States in the Senate, in that Capitol.
Well, when is the public speaking out justified? When would that ever be justified then? How much tyranny do people take? How much tyranny do blacks take from police before they speak out? How much non-racial tyranny do people take from a oppressive government before they speak out? At what point does it become their right?
So this is a very complicated thing, and I've wondered all my life. You remember, I used to go to the South every year from age 4 to age 19 and be treated
from Detroit. Yeah, from Detroit.
And be treated like you wouldn't treat a wild, wolf. And
well, we know about your injuries and
And my mother had to stop school in 8th grade in a county in which white people got free school through the 12th grade and scholarship money to go to college. I want you to think about that. The whole nation is constructed that way.
Right.
And so black folks ought to be very angry, and I get angry on some days, but I don't believe in violence. And the idea that I would be part of a mob to go into the Capitol and go after Speaker Ryan is beyond my ability to think that way.
But you're saying that's really that much different from going into a federal courthouse in Portland and trying to burn it down to the ground?
If you try to set a federal courthouse on fire.
Or tear down monuments, federal monuments, is it really that much different?
You, whoever you are, should be put in prison. Because if you set a building on fire, that's arson. And
but you see, that's the point, Ray. They weren't arrested. They weren't put in jail. They weren't.
Yes. So yesterday, thousands.
That's part of the frustration.
No, it's the opposite of what you're saying, Mike. I don't understand what you're talking about. Thousands of people.
The looters who were ignored in those businesses, the people who were arrested and immediately released without bail after they committed whatever kind of vandalism or whatever else. We saw it over and over and over again. And now the FBI and our U.S. attorney says they're going to overtly hunt down Rhode Islanders who may have been there.
Wait, they are, because
don't you see the difference?
No. This is the symbol of liberty, and this is the United States Congress. Sometimes, and we see this with common crimes. When you murder one person, they go after you. You murder, and I won't give an example, but you murder somebody else, they come after you even more. And this is an assault on the nation yesterday. This isn't what you're saying. And when you go after if you set a federal courthouse on fire, you ought to go to prison because it's arson. And I, the liberal, I'm not big on prison, but you do not try to destroy the society. You do not.
I
And
agree. We agree with that.
a democratic society in which Stacey Abrams, over an 8-year period, is able to get her act together and get people to vote who've never voted before in a state that used to have some of the ultimate. I mean, it's unbelievable that a Black man and a Jewish man got elected to the United States Senate in Georgia. That is nothing but sweat and work, probably some prayer, because it wasn't supposed to happen. But the Republicans made a mistake of having lousy candidates, and Trump insulted.
Well, that's another, but that's not what we're not talking about. Again, we're not talking about the elections here. I don't think those people were upset about the elections. I think they're upset about being locked down for 9 months. They're upset about seeing a double standard when it comes to attacks from the left versus attacks from the right. I think they're upset about losing their jobs, about having a pro-socialist new administration come in. I think they're upset. You know, I went through a long train of abuses that they're upset. They're upset about, with elections just being most recent.
So I don't agree with very much of what you've said, but let's say it's true. Elections have consequences. And I just sat through 4 years of Trump, and I prayed for him.
But in America, those consequences should never be tyranny.
Mike, I'm going to say something that
it should never be tyranny.
Mike, I'm going to say something my friends won't like. I have prayed for Donald Trump every time I think about it. I pause and pray for him. For the first 2 years he was in office, I never even called him any names, even in private. Okay? I put up with that because that's what you do in a democracy. And I pray that nobody will harm him. The idea that someone would harm or kill the president of the United States is as low a criminal act as a person can commit.
Any president.
And the idea that people would be offering to lynch Nancy Pelosi is just as low.
All right, but speaking of Trump, do you blame him for what happened yesterday?
Yes, he invited them.
Do you agree with Biden that that mob was our domestic terrorists?
Yes.
So what do you say then? What do you say then to this comment from your incoming?
I know that there are protests still happening in major cities across the United States. I'm just not seeing the reporting on it that I had for the first few weeks.
That's right. But they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And they're not, this is a movement. I'm telling you, they're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not. And we should not.
Isn't she wonderful?
So what would you call that?
What?
Encouraging the protesters and looters and rioters in those cities to keep it up?
I don't think
that's exactly what they were referring to.
No, she wasn't.
Yes, it was. Yes, right. Yes, it was. I didn't play the beginning, but yes, it was. What would you say to that?
She didn't.
You're denying it happened.
No. So I want the criminal justice.
She overtly told people to keep it up. Trump just invited people to a rally. He said nothing about attacking, rioting, breaking in, but yet you blame him, but won't blame our new vice president to be. Why?
I've been to, not now, we get in the car and drive down to the rallies and then come home. I don't get out of the car. So I just want to put in my journal that I went to the rally. My favorite was the post office rally because they were walking around the block and I drove around the block 5 times and honked at people. people have a right in a democracy to protest. And those folks yesterday had a right to do what they did until several of them and I'm only talking about the ones who did it.
Yep.
Several planted some bombs. We don't know whether it was 10 people or 1,000 who had guns. People got hurt.
What did Trump do to incite that violence?
If you listen to the
especially when you compare it to the words you just heard from Kamala Harris.
No. Kamala Harris has not invited thousands of people to Washington to go into the capital of the United States and get the kind of social justice or get the minimum wage, national minimum wage up from $7.50 to $15. She has not done that. She's an intelligent, able lawyer. She would not
incited protesters to keep it up.
Wait, there's nothing wrong with protesting in America.
Those were violent protests in those cities. They were destroying private property, they burning cars, burning businesses, trying to burn down a federal courthouse, and she's telling them to keep it up.
So, Mike, I'm not going to disagree with you.
Okay, let's move on then. Let's move on.
No, I'm saying we have a space in downtown Providence, and we had that day this summer where they looted and broke windows in 20 stores and shops. Really vicious.
Yep.
9 o'clock to midnight, set car on fire outside the mall.
Yep.
That is destructive to every element, to the economy, to
and I'm sure you did not encourage that.
And the Attorney General of Rhode Island is busy prosecuting 25 people. The other 500,
well, that's good to hear.
Didn't do anything except they were present.
Okay.
And I have a nephew who's the youngest member of our family, and he goes to these things, and I give him $100. I said, the first person who mentions violence, you call me on the phone and I'll give you $100 if you're backing up and going home. And he's been to 20 of these demonstrations in Detroit and had to go home 10 times. So it's cost me $1,000. He isn't doing anything wrong, as 99% of protesters are not, including yesterday. And I'm waiting for the number, how many thousands of people were there. I will bet you that not 1,000 did anything bad, and they were dumb enough to break into the Capitol.
Yeah, and when we talked about that earlier, we don't know how many of those were Trump supporters, how many of those were Antifa. We know there was a mix of both. All right, let me move on. Now, just quickly on this one. Based on what you said, I think we might agree on this. So today, the U.S. Attorney for Rhode Island basically put out a tweet saying that I'm going to paraphrase, we, together with other law enforcement, are committed to prosecuting those who travel from Rhode Island to commit federal crimes at our nation capital.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. Are you saying, just yes or no, that same attitude by U.S. attorneys and FBI and law enforcement in other states, that same attitude was towards the rioters in Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, and the other cities we saw.
And Providence.
And Providence.
And I just told you, the Attorney General of Providence.
You think it's the same attitude?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
I know, I'm talking about the violent offenders.
Yes, those who committed crimes, yes.
Yeah. Well,
is not a crime.
No, let me put my hat on. I'm serving on the parole board again.
Okay.
All kinds of people commit crimes and they're petty and they get away with it. And if the people hadn't done really bad things inside that Capitol, they probably would have got away with trespassing. Now, I know the names of 2 people who were there, and there are hundreds of people in Rhode Island who know the names of people because it's their cousin.
We had one on our show yesterday who was there. When he saw things starting to get a little emotional, he turned around, went back to his hotel.
Yes, and I think that the prosecutors and the Attorney General and the federal U.S. Attorney should be careful, because what I told you earlier, I will bet you not 10% of those people committed a crime and not 5% created a real crime where they punched a police officer in the face.
All right, let's reverse this a little.
But Mike, I really do believe this nation is a mess. And, you know, I think
because
we
have I think it's because we have double standards, Ray. We
don't
allow some people to get away with some things, and we bury and criticize and arrest and prosecute other people for other things. It's supposed to be blind. We're supposed to treat everybody the same.
And when did that begin to?
Well, I don't know. I believe the left wants special privileges for special victim groups all the time. I believe that's what identity politics is all about. And we think that's unbearable, that's completely unequal treatment under the law.
Now,
regardless of past wrongs, the two wrongs don't
wait, past wrongs may be the day before yesterday. But can I tell you this, and I tell people all the time, I sat on that parole board for 2 years, and I have the names of about 400 Black and brown people who got double and triple the sentence that white folks got for the same crime.
Well, that's flat out wrong.
Wait, and they would come to the hearing one after the other, and I tell the parole board, can you please tell me the difference between this Latino kid
flat out wrong
and the white kid we had 20 minutes ago? On terms
so you agree if it's wrong one way, it's wrong the other way too?
Yes, except this is where we part company. I will bet you, in fact, I had someone say this to me once. I'm going to be nice today and not tell you who said it. She told me it wasn't racism like I was proclaiming. It's lawyerism. Whoever has the highest price, big shot lawyer gets the best deal.
That's always been the case. It's not fair, but that's always been the case.
And these Black Latino kids, only 1 out of 50 of their mothers mortgaged the house.
Well, listen, you know, we've been with you on that civil asset forfeiture reform when, a few hundred bucks or your this or this little item you own gets taken from you by the police just because you were suspected of a crime, and then you have to go hire a lawyer to get it back. It doesn't make sense, right? So,
or you can't afford a lawyer.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. You can't afford one to get your $800 back, like the case we did. All right, let me move on. All right, so we agree it's not fair either way.
I want to talk about Trump for 1 minute if you let me, but I'll wait.
All right, let's finish at the end because I want to get to this one. Let's stay with yesterday's actions. A woman was killed by the Capitol Police, right?
Correct. And
she was unarmed, correct?
First, they didn't know that, and it appears, and I don't have the facts.
I saw. Have you seen the video?
No.
Yeah, I saw the video. She was just a group of people inside the Capitol. They had tried to get through a door. They couldn't. Let me finish. They're obviously armed Capitol on the other side, and they were just milling around saying, "Okay, what do we do now?" All of a sudden, a shot came out, and it hit her. She was unarmed. She posed no direct threat to anybody. So here's my question, Ray. Here's my question: did her life matter?
All lives matter, but you're being disingenuous.
No, why?
Most of the members of Congress, including our members, House members, they were escorted out by security and police. And it looks like 20 members of the House couldn't get out in time. They were in the balcony, they had trouble, and they had to hide there. The majority of
this woman was posing them no threat.
No. The majority of security left.
Stay with the woman for now.
No, that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
They were trying to break into the chamber, breaking the doors. And the 4 or 5, and you see them, I've seen the video, the 4 or 5 officers had no clue whether there were 10 people or 500 outside that door. And when they broke the glass, they fired. They are supposed to protect the members of Congress. And she was involved in a violent act, which you're diminishing.
So when police shoot an armed person with a knife, as we just saw in Wisconsin, threatening them and the public, why is that wrong? This is not.
You keep trying to get me to go someplace I don't want to go.
Well, but again, this is the issue, the double standard that's out there. It's this double standard, Ray,
It is not a double standard.
Motivates those people yesterday to have the emotion they had.
Mike, they're breaking down the door to break into the chamber. And there were someplace between 10 and 20 members of Congress inside that chamber.
That's not what the video showed.
Now they're in the attic, in the balcony.
No, they were there, but at the moment of the shot, there was nobody near the door.
Wait, you don't have to be near the door. That is the line of defense.
So when a police officer says, you crossed my line of defense and shoots an armed black person,
I'm going to tell
why
you,
is the world up in riot over that, and not why just somebody in a crowd yesterday not?
Let me try to answer you the best I can in the couple minutes I have.
That's all we got.
I work for a United States congressman, and on more than one occasions, people offered to kill him, and he had to have a bodyguard. And Mr. Featherstone would have killed you if you pulled a gun on the congressman. That's what he was there for.
Yeah.
And those police were there to protect the 20
This
members.
woman was unarmed.
She was outside the door, breaking the door down. And if you go back to the video, you do not know what is about to come, except they barricaded the door, and it was their job to keep the chamber free of people.
Okay, so the point being, these police shootings, whether it's a white woman like yesterday or an armed black man or an unarmed black woman or whatever, they're complicated.
And I'm going to agree with you on that. And the officer who killed her, it's going to bother his heart and soul for a lifetime. And he's
Should it be publicly vilified, drawn and quartered, and prosecuted?
No, him.
But you want that for the police officer who killed black threats?
So we should talk about this on another occasion.
Okay, we can do that.
But police need to be sure before they shoot. And I know 5 FBI agents, 5 Secret
Yeah, and I know you know a lot more about this than I do.
Wait, and 100 Providence police officers and Warwick and Newport, okay? You can't get a single one of them to tell you that they should not have taken defensive action at that point when they thought the door was going to give. And if they hadn't, and someone came in there and killed 1, 2, 3, or all 20 members of Congress, what would we be saying? So
I agree with you that they were there to protect the members. But again, what I don't understand is the double standard.
What is the double standard?
That when a different police officer in Kenosha, let's just take that example, shoots a black man who's going into his car and grabs a knife, directly putting them in danger, that's not acceptable, and that there might be riots when that shooting is deemed justified.
I'm trying to be careful and you won't let me. I'm
just trying to make you compare the two. They're
comparable. I don't know all the facts on the shooting of this man.
Right, neither do we.
Except from what I could see. How many times was he shot, Mike?
Oh yeah, we were talking about that, 7, yeah.
It's a bit much.
Yeah.
But I also have trouble with the knife. I didn't see it. Now,
well, it was there. The report said it was there. It was in his hand.
So, Mike, not now.
Again, we have an unarmed woman with a potential threat versus someone trying to arm himself to be a threat. Okay, all right, listen. That's all I'm pointing out is these are some of the perceived inequities, inequalities that all year long, along with the lockdowns, along with, everything else that's happened, are leading many freedom-loving people like yesterday to a breaking point. And there does come a point when people like Thomas Jefferson said, you must stand up and maybe even forcefully.
I know you're trying to close this out, but guess what, Mike? there isn't a normal observer who would tell you that that crowd of thousands was badly treated yesterday. And they arrested 53 people, and about 50 of them hit a police officer. That's about the only way you could get.
No, they were badly treated by the media en masse, not by the police. I agree with that. Except for that one incident with the woman.
I'm going to tell you again, and I wasn't there, and I know only one Capitol.
I mean, you just called them terrorists. You agreed with Joe Biden's characterization that they were terrorists. Is that fair treatment?
When you break into the Speaker of the House's office in a democracy, probably with weapons or not with weapons, you have gone too far. And I had tears in my eyes yesterday afternoon at 4 o'clock. You're not supposed to live in a society where people do that. And I'm going to tell you again, I am not talking about the 48 Black members of Congress. I'm not talking about.
Thank you for that humanity, Ray. I thank you for that humanity.
I'm talking about all of them. I said a prayer yesterday. I didn't know the facts. But I said a prayer for the woman the minute I heard that she was killed. A prayer from the heart, because we shouldn't have this kind of violence associated with politics. Really. And let's talk again, because one day what I want.
Yeah, we need to. And Ray, again, let me just applaud you and thank you for coming on and putting up with me. All right.
You're fine. You believe things that are. See, I actually believe this. I believe we could find not common ground, but we could find reasonable ways forward.
Beautiful.
Seriously.
Let's do that again very soon. Hopefully it's not after some tragic incident inspires us to do it. Let's just do it. I'll reach out to you. You reach out to me. Let's find an angle. And let's talk about it. These are such important discussions. And, let me tell our viewers, Ray, and I know you have to go too, but, Ray and I, we tried to get a little something started in this state. I can't even remember. What do we call it? The family?
Yes.
The family something initiative, where basically we said, well, let's, instead of yelling at each other and talking past each other, even though we disagree on so many things, let's sit down. We had Gary Sass and we had another woman and a few others that joined us. And we did work to get, we did try to work together on criminal justice reform and on civil asset forfeiture reform. And it is the way forward, Ray. You're right about that. And that's why I love you as a human and admire you so much for coming on this show.
You're kind, and a blessing on your house.
Thank you, Ray.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Ray. We will talk very soon. Ray Rickman, friends, Rhode Island hero in the minority community, I guess. So listen, folks, as we wrap up, wow, this is intense stuff. I don't think the left appreciates freedom. It's not a catchphrase. It's not trite. We have this past year suffered a loss of freedom in so many ways. Many people adore this president who's about to leave office and feel like I do, even though it has not been proved, feel like I do that he was gypped in the election. So that frustration is palpable. It's real. Those people who gathered there initially, I don't really know if it was a protest. I don't even know if that's what it was supposed to be, but it was just an expression, a cry for freedom. Stop the government telling us what to do with our lives. Stop the unequal treatment. Stop calling us racist and guilty of white privilege. Just stop the government stepping on our backs. I think that's what yesterday was about. And I think the motive for those people for being there was justified. Their motive was not. They didn't go there planning to storm the Capitol and vandalize and hurt people. That happens. That can happen in any mob scene, left or right. That does happen. But the reasons they went there, again, my last words, were completely American, as Thomas Jefferson predicted would happen. That when a free people are consistently tyrannized, sometimes they must speak out, and sometimes that has to be. I don't know if that doesn't justify anything. But the question is, are we at that time? For In the Dugout, Mike Stenos, we'll see you tomorrow with Dr. Andrew Boston the whole day. Unless something else breaks, will be pandemic, COVID, Rhode Island, vaccines, all that kind of stuff. See you tomorrow and